Hello, Philosophy 101. Welcome back to class. It's a little bit different, but here we are. Today, I want to pick up where we left off when we were meeting in person. We had just completed the epistemology section of our class. Remember, epistemology is that area of philosophy that asks the question, how do I know? So we want to take the tools that we've been learning about. Remember the reason handout? Reason in itself, the laws of thought, reason in its use, concepts, judgments, and arguments, the formative use of reason, the interpretive use of reason, the critical use of reason, and the constructive use of reason. We also want to talk about reason in us. It's natural, ontological, transcendental, and fundamental. So we want to take those tools and combine it with the definition of knowledge. Remember, we talked about knowledge is justified true belief, and that there is weak justification, which is through our senses and gives us a high probability of truth, and strong justification, which is through reason and argument. So we want to see if we can take those tools now and move into looking at strong justification for metaphysics. And remember, metaphysics is the area of philosophy that asks the question, what is real or what is eternal? So today we're going to start talking about eternal. And I want to draw your attention to the handout that is listed here, Presupposition, our most basic belief. It's in Canvas. I will be using this handout as an outline. Remember, you should be taking notes. I will ask quiz questions from the handouts, from these lectures, from short readings, and you should be taking notes, and you're going to turn those notes into me weekly so that I can see that you are actively engaged with the material. All right, so let's start looking at this handout. We're talking about our most basic belief. Remember the house drawing I used to do? You have the bottom, which is the ground, which is our epistemology, and then we put our foundation on the ground, that's our metaphysics, and then we build the house, that is our ethics. So right now we're talking about the foundation, our most basic belief. All right, so we're going to talk about our most basic belief. So follow along on the handout with me. Our most basic belief is about our most basic concept. Okay, so we're talking about concepts. Remember, reason grasps concepts first. Concepts have to do with meaning. And so what is our most basic concept? So if I were to hold this up as a pencil, say, what's the most basic thing you can say about this? I know some of you are thinking it's black, it writes, it's plastic, but what does it have to be in order to have all of those qualities? It has to exist, right? So if it didn't exist, it wouldn't be plastic or black or able to write. So existence is our most basic concept. So look at number 2 here. Logically, the most basic concept is that of existence. Now we could talk about different kinds of existence. Here's where we're going, okay, let's use reason and think critically. Existence is of 2 kinds. There's temporal existence, which means not always, and eternal existence, which means always. So on the handout, it says temporal with beginning and eternal without beginning. So we've talked about this before. So existence is of 2 kinds, temporal and eternal. And of those 2, eternal existence is prior, logically, and ontologically to temporal existence. What does that mean? It means that in the order of our thinking, eternal comes before temporal. Why? Because eternal is always, didn't have a beginning or an end. Temporal had a beginning, so temporal would have had to have come from eternal. So logically, eternal comes first. And then ontologically, remember ontos has to do with being. In the order of being, eternal being comes before temporal being. So temporal would have come from the eternal. Or else maybe there's no temporal being, everything is eternal. So we're going to look at those views soon. Now, we have a concept of eternal, but we don't have an image of eternal. You don't see it. We have the idea of eternal. So the idea is there, and now we have to say, okay, is the idea something that's in reality? Is there something that's eternal? Now, we have gone over this before, but we're going to go over it again. And I should warn you, this little next discussion is going to blow your mind. And I'm going to put a video up that kind of helps you to see what the concepts are here, but it's about infinity and time. So it's going to hurt your head. If we were meeting in class, you'd be like, oh, Dr. Burton, this hurts my head. So, okay, warning, this is going to hurt your head. All right, so section B of the handout. Eternal is not the same as everlasting. So everlasting, remember, has a beginning and goes on forever. And it's not the same as aveternal. Now, this is the concept that's a little bit mind-blowing. Aveternal means it's forever, in the past, in the future, and it's in time. So eternal and in time, we're going to find out that that's a contradiction. It's not possible to have something that's eternal and in time. So I will post another video called Hilbert's Hotel. I got to make a note to myself to post this. Hilbert's Hotel is a mathematical problem that shows how difficult it is to conceive of infinity, and then how impossible it is for something to be infinite and in time. Okay, so I'm going to explain my portion here, and then you are going to view that video for a mind-blowing experience, okay? So look at point 2 here. What is eternal is independent, self-existing, self-maintaining, and self-explaining. Okay, so if something is eternal, it can't depend on anything else for its existence. So it's independent. It's self-existing, meaning there can't be something else that keeps it going or is maintaining it. Self-maintaining and self-explaining. There's nothing outside of itself to point to it as a source of explanation. Okay, so this is part of the definition of eternal. Whatever is eternal would have these attributes: independence, self-existence, self-maintaining, self-explaining. Okay, so we're going to use this to test what possibly could be eternal. Okay, the next portion is going to be the part that hurts your head. All right. Point 3, there are no unique events in an eternal being or process. So if something is eternal, then it has to be always or not happening at all. Okay, so no unique events. A unique event is a one-time occurrence in an eternal being or process. For example, let's say my soul is eternal and it's reincarnating forever and ever, going through infinite number of reincarnations, then release from that cycle would be impossible because you can't have a one-time release. So either you don't get released from the cycle of reincarnation or you are always released in some way. I know this is going to get confusing. Another example, let's say the universe is eternal, the material world is eternal, then it can't have a unique beginning or a unique ending. So it has to be a cycle that goes on forever and ever and ever. And we will look at that when we talk about material monism. Okay, so here's the explanation about why there cannot be an eternal, a unique event in an eternal being or process. If there were an infinite amount of time, remember infinite is unlimited, if there were an infinite amount of time, it could not be explained why a unique event did not happen before it did. So in infinite time, a one-time occurrence, why did it happen at that point and not at another point? There's no reasonable explanation. So if there's an infinite amount of time, you can't explain why a one-time unique event did not happen before it did. Second, how could a unique event happen at all in an infinite series? Infinite eternal series. So again, when I show you that Hilbert Hotel video, that will explain how you can't have an infinite series. Now, the explanation underneath might help you a little bit. So an infinite series cannot be crossed in finite time. So think about infinite is limitless, time is limited. Time has points that can be marked out, right? So you can't have an infinite series of finite points because you could always add one more. Point B, there cannot be an infinite series since what is infinite is indivisible. So if it's infinite, it can't be divided, but time is by nature divisible. So the last part, since time is divisible, time must not be an infinite series. So time can be divided. What is infinite cannot be divided. So aeviternal is infinite in time, which means it's indivisible and divisible, which is a contradiction. So that is, all of that was to show that you cannot have a unique event in an eternal being or process, or aeviternality is not a logical option when we start talking about metaphysics. So either time had a beginning, time is an illusion, or maybe there's a cycle of time. So in metaphysics, your view of time is dependent on your view of what is eternal. So infinite and eternal are concepts that go together. Whatever is eternal is also infinite in its qualities or attributes. So just hold on to those ideas. I want to review this next section. We've talked about this in class before, but we're going to go over it again. That there must be at least something that is eternal, assuming anything exists at all. You know what? I think I'm going to pause here and move to the whiteboard, because in my little studio, I have a whiteboard that I made. So I think I'm going to go over to the whiteboard to pick up this section. All right, so stay tuned. I'm going to pause this and pick it up in just a second. All right, here we are. We're trying to use the whiteboard that I made in my studio. I've drawn this square of opposition, and now I'm going to put the positions we talked about with eternal on each corner. So here we talked about all is eternal, right? And what was the contradiction? Do you remember? Do you remember? Can you guess? Some is not eternal. Remember? What was the contrary? What goes here? Yes, none is eternal. And what was the contradiction of none is eternal? You got it. Some is eternal. I like this whiteboard. Don't you like it? It's kind of working out. All right, so what we had to do is eliminate none is eternal. And if you remember the argument, it's on the handout that we're looking at. The argument was, if none is eternal, then all is temporal. And if all is temporal, that means all came into being. If all came into being, all came into being from non-being, which violates the law of identity. So we said that can't be, right? So we said none is eternal was false. It's not possible. There weren't any worldviews or world religions or philosophies that consistently held to that position. So we got that at least something is eternal is true. So then we combined some is plus some is not to get only some. Only some is eternal. And then we had this new contradiction. Either everything is eternal or only some is eternal. And that's where we find the major philosophical systems and the major world religions. And so what we're going to do in this next portion of the class is look at the positions. So we talked about material monism, that all that exists is one thing and it's material, it's matter, all is one. We're going to look at spiritual monism, that all is one, all is spirit. Remember, matter is that which has size, it's extended, and it is not conscious. Spirit has no size and is conscious. So these are mutually exclusive. And then we also will look at dualism. Dualism is the position that says that there are two things that are eternal. Matter is eternal and spirit is eternal. They're co-eternal. So we have those positions under all is eternal. And then under only some is eternal, we'll look at theism, which says God, the creator, is eternal, and everything else that exists is temporal, is created. And we'll look at deism, which says God is eternal, but God does not rule. Where theism says God rules, deism says God does not rule. So we'll look at those two positions. All right, I think this will end our portion. I'm going to go back to the little screen here. This section here, we went over the contradictory, nothing is eternal is a self-contradiction. We went over that argument. I may ask you quiz questions about that argument, so put that in your notes. Be sure you understand that argument. And then we went over this section just now. Presupposition is the most basic belief. Here, let me highlight that. Presupposition is the most basic belief that is used to interpret experience. There are two presuppositions, all is eternal or only some is eternal, so I just went over those. And the last section says that nobody is fully conscious or consistent in their presupposition. There's an admixture of both of these views in each person, which with one being more at the center, at the core of our beliefs. And then history is an outworking of these presuppositions being challenged and responding to challenges over time. So we'll pause here. I should probably do a video of the history of philosophy somewhere in there to show this to you. Actually, there is a video. There's a history of philosophy video I made for you. Remember? I'm going to put it in our assignments to watch. Okay, so what did we go over today? We talked about presupposition, our most basic belief. We looked at the concept of existence, and that existence is either eternal or temporal. And in eternal existence, we saw that there are two options. Either everything that exists is eternal, or some things are eternal. Only some things. So those are the two options that we're going to look at in metaphysics. And then we mentioned we'll go through these four major positions in eternality when we get into our unit on metaphysics. All right, so what should you take from this in terms of questions? I want you to know the definition of eternal and know the definition of temporal. You should understand why aveternal is not possible. And you should also know the argument that something must be eternal. And that was the argument, nothing is eternal leads to a contradiction. Okay, it's all on that handout, presupposition, our most basic belief. And I'm going to pause here. Your job now is to take notes and submit a discussion board post for the week. And there'll be some more videos for the week. I'm going to give you the history video and the Hilbert's Hotel video. All right.